Jason Carter sat alone in the dimly lit living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his mind drowning in regret. His life had once been perfect, a thriving career, a beautiful home, and a wife he adored. But now the illusion had shattered. He still had his job and house, but the woman he once trusted with his heart? She had betrayed him in the worst possible way. His nearly 5-year marriage to Olivia had started like a dream. They met at Sterling Financial Group, where she worked as an admin assistant before becoming the executive secretary to his boss, Lucas Sterling. 7 months ago, everything changed. Lucas, the arrogant heir to the Sterling Empire, had been handed a high-ranking position despite his lack of experience. Jason had always respected Lucas's father, Robert, who had been his mentor. Robert had seen potential in Jason when he transitioned from military service to corporate life, helping him secure a job at the firm. It was Robert's support that helped Jason build his career, and for years things were smooth. Then Lucas entered the picture. Unlike his father, he was reckless, entitled, and saw women as objects. When he took over as regional manager, his first move was to surround himself with people he could manipulate. And, unfortunately, Olivia had been one of them. Jason's hands clenched around his glass as he thought back to how it had all started, the moment his perfect marriage began to crumble. Jason Carter had always been a man of discipline and integrity. His years in the Marines had forged him into someone who valued loyalty above all else. When he transitioned to civilian life, Robert Sterling had given him an opportunity, recognizing his dedication and sharp analytical mind. Over the years, Jason had climbed the corporate ladder, proving his worth and securing a future for himself and Olivia. He had met Olivia when she joined the company as an administrative assistant. Their romance had been swift yet passionate, and within 2 years they were married. Their wedding was an elegant affair, hosted by Robert himself. It was clear that Robert had a soft spot for Jason and treated him almost like a son. He had even paid for their honeymoon in Hawaii. For years, everything seemed perfect. Jason and Olivia had a strong marriage, built on mutual respect. Or so he had thought. Then Lucas Sterling entered the picture. Unlike his father, Lucas was everything Jason despised in a man. Arrogant, entitled, and utterly careless with people's lives. He had coasted through life, knowing that he would one day inherit the family business. He flirted openly with female employees, barely put in real work, and carried an air of invincibility around him. Jason had tried to guide him when he was first promoted, out of respect for Robert, but it was like trying to teach an animal manners. Lucas was uncontrollable. Jason had been wary of Lucas from the start, especially when he noticed the way he looked at Olivia. It was a look Jason recognized from his time in the military, the look of a predator eyeing its next target. He should have done something then. He should have stopped Olivia from getting too close. But at the time, he had trusted her. The first red flag came when Lucas suddenly suggested Olivia for the role of his executive assistant. Jason still remembered that conversation clearly. "I've been thinking about hiring a new EA, and I think Olivia would be a perfect fit," Lucas had said casually, sitting in Jason's office like he owned the place. Jason had frowned. "Olivia? My wife?" "Yeah. Gretchen is retiring soon, and we need fresh blood." Lucas leaned forward, smirking. "She's professional, smart, and, let's be honest, she's easy on the eyes." Jason's jaw tightened. "Have you spoken to Olivia about this?" "Not yet. Wanted to run it by you first," Lucas said, still smirking. To see if you'd be comfortable with it. The job involves late hours, travel. You okay with that?" Jason had met Lucas's gaze evenly. "I trust my wife." Lucas chuckled, leaning back. "That's good. Trust is important in a marriage." He then added, "There might even be a promotion for you down the line." Jason had ignored the obvious attempt at manipulation. "If Olivia wants the job, it's her decision. But I expect professionalism. I expect you to respect our marriage." "Of course, Jason. I respect you. And your marriage." The way he had smirked then, Jason should have known. That night, Jason had confronted Olivia about it. "Lucas offered you the EA position, didn't he?" Olivia had nodded. "Yes, he mentioned it today." Jason had studied her expression. "What do you think?" "It would mean more travel and late nights," she admitted. "But it's a big raise. We could use the extra money, especially if we want to have kids soon." Jason had hesitated. "Are you concerned about anything?" "I know the rumors about Lucas, but do you trust me?" she had asked. Jason had sighed. "Of course I trust you, but I don't trust him. He asked about you at home today. It felt inappropriate." Olivia had laughed it off. "That's just Lucas. He flirts with everyone. It's harmless." "I don't like it." "It's just a job, Jason," she had reassured him. "I can handle myself." And so, despite his instincts screaming at him to say no, Jason had let it go. He had convinced himself that Olivia was strong enough to handle Lucas, that their marriage was unshakable. He had never been more wrong. Over the next few months, Olivia's behavior began to change. She worked late more often, her business trips became more frequent, and when she was home, she was distant. Their intimate life suffered. She was always exhausted, always distracted. Then Robert Sterling had a stroke. The man who had been a father figure to Jason, the man who had built the company from the ground up, passed away overnight. Lucas saw his chance. He fully expected to take his father's place as CEO, but the board refused. They appointed an interim CEO, David Matt, citing Lucas's lack of experience. Furious, Lucas threw himself into his work, determined to prove himself, and Olivia became his most valuable tool. Jason barely recognized his wife anymore. Her wardrobe had changed. Tighter dresses, higher heels, plunging necklines. She was no longer the woman he had married. One Sunday evening, after she returned from a business trip to New York, Jason had finally confronted her. "Olivia, we need to talk." She barely looked up from her phone. "About what?" she asked, her tone irritated. "About us. Lucas's schedule is tearing us apart. We need time for ourselves." She sighed, rubbing her temple. "I don't have time for this, Jason." "You have to make time." For the first time, she hesitated. "All right," she said after a long pause. "Lucas said we can take next week off, but we have to attend a party at his house on Friday night." Jason frowned. "What kind of party?" "Just a small gathering with his college friends and a few clients." Something about this didn't sit right with Jason, but he agreed under one condition. "Fine, but you come home on time the rest of this week." She smiled. "Deal." At that moment, Jason wanted to believe things could still be fixed, that this was just a rough patch. He had no idea that this party would be the final nail in the coffin of his marriage. Jason stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting the sleeves of his casual button-down shirt. His reflection stared back at him, but he barely recognized the man he saw. His sharp military instincts had been telling him for weeks that something was off. His wife's growing distance, her late nights, and her sudden change in style. And tonight, something didn't feel right. Behind him, Olivia was getting dressed, and when she stepped in front of the mirror, Jason's breath hitched. The dress she wore was new, black, silky, and much shorter than anything she had ever worn before. Slits ran up both sides, revealing smooth skin, and the open back dipped low, exposing a glimpse of her lace underwear. Her usual elegance had been replaced by something provocative, something meant to attract attention. Jason's gut twisted. "Wow," he muttered. "That's not exactly casual." She smirked, turning to admire herself in the mirror. "Lucas asked me to wear it tonight." Jason clenched his jaw. "He what?" "Relax," she sighed. "It's just a dress." "No, it's not." His voice hardened. "It's a message." She rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting." Jason walked up behind her, his hands resting lightly on her waist. "Are you sure you want to go?" he asked quietly. She pulled away. "Of course I do." Jason inhaled deeply. His instincts screamed at him to stop this, to make her stay home, but she had already checked out of their marriage. He could feel it. "Maybe I need to see it for myself," he thought. Maybe he needed to witness what was really happening. "All right," he said, forcing calm into his voice, "but be careful. Someone might get the wrong idea." She chuckled, but there was something in her eyes, something cold. "Don't worry, Jason. Everyone knows their boundaries." Do they? Jason wondered. Lucas's townhouse was in an expensive part of the city, the kind of neighborhood where rich executives threw wild parties behind locked doors. As Jason and Olivia stepped inside, the heavy scent of marijuana hit him immediately. Laughter and music filled the air. Jason scanned the room, instantly assessing the situation like a soldier entering enemy territory. There were 5 men in total, including Lucas. 3 of them were strangers: John Whitehead, George Franklin, and Alan Jenkins. Lucas introduced them all, but what Jason noticed most was what he didn't do. He didn't introduce Olivia. Instead, Lucas turned to her and grinned. "Damn, Olivia, you look incredible." Jason's fists tightened, but before he could react, the other men nodded in agreement as Olivia posed slightly, modeling the dress. She liked their attention. Jason felt something crack inside him. Lucas handed Olivia a glass of wine before turning to Jason. "And for you?" Jason shook his head. "I don't drink much." That wasn't entirely true. He had a high alcohol tolerance, but he had chosen to stay in control ever since his military days. Tonight, more than ever, he needed to keep his mind sharp. Lucas smirked. "Suit yourself. You're off next week anyway. If you get too messed up, you can always stay here." Jason's spine stiffened at the words. Was that the plan? To make sure he got drunk enough to pass out? He watched Olivia down her wine in one big sip. Something was wrong. Jason stayed quiet, observing. Olivia took a seat on the love seat, and Lucas immediately sat next to her. Too close. Jason deliberately took a seat across from them, watching. "So, Jason," one of the men, John, said, "I heard you were in the Marines. Ever see combat?" Jason nodded. "Did you ever kill someone?" A flicker of emotion passed through Jason's eyes, but he kept his voice steady. "That's not something I like to talk about." John nodded, but George suddenly pulled out a bag of cocaine from his jacket. He rolled a joint, lit it, and passed it around. Jason waved it off. "I'll pass." Lucas grinned. "Oh, come on, Jason. Lighten up. It's a party." Jason didn't take the bait. "You go ahead." The joint made its way to Olivia. Jason expected her to refuse, but she didn't. She took a deep inhale, coughed slightly, then laughed. "Damn," she said. "That's good stuff." Jason's blood ran cold. Who was this woman? Lucas leaned back, draping an arm casually around Olivia's shoulders. You know, Jason, Lucas said, smiling, Olivia's been a real asset to the company. I don't know what I'd do without her. Jason's muscles tensed. Lucas's hand dropped onto Olivia's thigh. For a split second, Jason was sure he saw Lucas's fingers inch under her dress. Jason stood up. I need to use the restroom, he said. First door on the left, Lucas replied, smirking. Jason walked calmly to the bathroom, but the moment he locked the door, he stared at himself in the mirror, his breath shallow. Something was happening, something he couldn't ignore anymore. His wife wasn't just drifting away. She was already gone. Jason pulled out his phone and started recording. He needed proof. When he stepped out, he kept his phone discreetly recording from his pocket. He moved back toward the living room, just in time to see Olivia snorting cocaine. Jason's stomach twisted as the other men did the same. He glanced at his own drink and saw a faint residue of white powder swirling at the bottom. A drugged drink. And then it hit him. His body suddenly felt heavy. His vision blurred, and his limbs refused to move. Are you okay, babe? Olivia's voice sounded distant. Jason tried to answer, but his mouth wouldn't form the words. Lucas and the men stood up, Olivia grabbing onto Lucas's arm. Jason tried to stand. He couldn't. Lucas smirked. Take a nap, Jason. His vision darkened, and then, just before he blacked out, he heard Olivia's voice, whispering in his ear. I really do love you. And then everything went dark. Jason's head pounded as he slowly regained consciousness. The house was dark and silent, except for the faint sound of snoring upstairs. His limbs felt heavy, his mouth dry. What the hell happened? Then it all came rushing back. The party, the drugged drink, Lucas's smirk, Olivia's betrayal. He forced himself up, his vision clearing as he scanned the room. His phone was still recording. He stopped the video and slipped the device into his pocket. But the real nightmare began when he crept upstairs. The master bedroom door was half open. Inside, under dim moonlight, he saw Olivia lying on top of Lucas, both unclothed. One of Lucas's friends was also in bed, while the other two slept nearby. Jason felt his stomach churn. He had seen a lot in war, but nothing like this. Keeping his breathing steady, he quietly stepped back, heading downstairs. He needed evidence. First, he poured what was left of his drugged drink into a container, proof that they had tried to incapacitate him. Then, he found Olivia's purse and dug through it, spotting an extra key, a key to Lucas's house. He pocketed it, grabbed Olivia's phone, and quickly scrolled through her texts. What he saw made his blood boil. Months of messages, explicit pictures, plans. She had been sleeping with Lucas for at least 6 months. He copied everything and emailed it to himself. Before leaving, he took off his wedding ring and placed it on top of Olivia's purse. A final message. Then, without making a sound, he slipped out the door, turned on his car, and drove into the night. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jason drove in silence, his grip tightening around the steering wheel. The betrayal had burned deep, but he wasn't going to react with blind rage. No, he was going to be smart. He was going to destroy them. He pulled into a 24-hour convenience store parking lot, pulled out his phone, and dialed. RK, I need your help. R.K. Evans, his old Marine buddy, ran a private investigation firm. If anyone could uncover dirt, it was him. Damn, Jason, you sound pissed. What's going on? Jason kept it short. I need surveillance inside Lucas's place. I have his spare key, and I need this drink analyzed." RK let out a low whistle. "That bad, huh?" "Worse. Meet me at your place in 20. Jason hung up, grabbed a pack of cigarettes, though he hadn't smoked in years, then drove home. When RK arrived, Jason played the recording from the party. RK listened in silence. When it ended, he let out a long breath. "Jesus, these bastards weren't just cheating on you, they were setting you up." Jason nodded. "I want everything. Surveillance inside my house and Lucas's. I need leverage before I burn their world to the ground." RK clapped his shoulder. "Consider it done." With RK handling the tech, Jason turned to his own preparations. He still had a personal bank account from before the marriage. He transferred half their joint savings into it and canceled their shared credit cards. Then he sat back, lit a cigarette, and watched the flames eat through Olivia's wedding dress. She had thrown their marriage away. Now he would make sure she lost everything. Jason barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Olivia in Lucas's arms, whispering lies, laughing at his pain. But anger wasn't enough. He needed to be calculated. At dawn, RK sent him a message. "RK, surveillance set up in both locations. Audio, video, everything. Also, your drink was drugged with a mix of sedatives and cocaine. These bastards were trying to turn you into an addict." Jason's jaw tightened. So, that was their plan. As he checked the live feed from Lucas's house, Olivia was still asleep, tangled in sheets with Lucas. The men were slowly waking up, completely unaware that they were being watched. RK called. "They're planning something, Jason." Jason exhaled sharply. "What?" "Olivia's heading back to you. Lucas gave her a syringe. She's supposed to inject you with something to knock you out. Then they'll kidnap you." Jason let out a slow, bitter laugh. "They think I'm that stupid?" "They think you're weak," RK corrected. "That's their mistake." Jason wasn't weak. He was going to make sure they never forgot that. An hour later, Olivia arrived at their house in an Uber, clutching her purse tightly. Jason sat calmly in the living room, the fireplace still burning the last of their wedding photos. She hesitated when she saw the ashes. "Jason, what are you doing?" He took a slow drag from his cigarette. "Watching the past burn." She swallowed. "Can we talk?" He nodded toward her purse. "What's in there?" She froze. "What do you mean?" Jason stood up, towering over her. "You were going to drug me, weren't you?" Her face drained of color. No, that's not." Jason grabbed her purse and dumped its contents onto the coffee table. The syringe rolled onto the surface. Silence. She was caught. She knew it. "Who are you, Olivia?" Jason asked coldly. "Because the woman I married wouldn't have done this." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't have a choice." Jason snorted. "You had a choice every time you climbed into his bed." She broke down. "Jason, please." But he held up a hand. "Call Lucas. Put it on speaker. Tell him you did it." She stared at him in horror. "Jason, he'll—" "Do it." His voice was ice. Shaking, she dialed. Lucas answered instantly. "Is it done?" She forced a shaky breath. "Yes." Lucas chuckled. "Good girl. We'll be there in 10. Jason smirked. "Perfect." As she hung up, he leaned in close. "You just set up your lover, Olivia." And this was just the beginning. Jason sat in his recliner, watching Olivia tremble as she clutched the phone in her hands. She knew what was coming, and for the first time, she feared him. Not because he would hurt her, but because she had underestimated him. 10 minutes later, Jason saw the headlights of Lucas's car through the window. His grip tightened around the hunting knife he had kept hidden by his side. Lucas walked in first, his usual arrogant smirk plastered on his face. Behind him, his 3 goons followed, looking eager. Olivia stood frozen as they entered, her breath shaky. Lucas barely glanced at Jason, turning to Olivia instead. "Where is he?" Jason spoke before she could. "Right here." Lucas's head snapped in his direction. "Oh, you're still up?" Jason smirked, leaning forward. "Why? Did you think I'd be out cold by now?" The smirk on Lucas's face wavered. Something was off, and he could feel it. The front door burst open. Lucas barely had time to react before RK's team rushed in, armed and ready. Within seconds, Lucas and his men were thrown to the ground, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Lucas struggled. "What the hell is this?" Jason stood up slowly, his eyes burning with cold rage. "This, Lucas, is your reckoning." The 3 men looked at Olivia in confusion. "What's happening?" one of them asked. Jason smirked. "Your girl set you up." Olivia gasped. "No, Jason ignored her. He crouched in front of Lucas, pulling out his phone. "I have everything, Lucas. The drugs, the cheating, the setup, the plan to turn me into an addict. It's all recorded." Lucas's face paled. "You have no idea what you're doing." Jason laughed. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing." RK stepped forward, his phone in hand. "The cops are 5 minutes out. You're done, Lucas." For the first time, Lucas looked truly afraid. Jason leaned down one last time. "You took my wife, my trust, and tried to take my life. Now, I'm taking everything from you." Outside, the sound of the police sirens grew louder. It was over. The flashing red and blue lights lit up Jason's front yard as officers stormed in, guns raised. "Hands where we can see them," one of the officers shouted. RK's men backed away, letting the police take over. Jason watched calmly as Lucas and his goons were yanked up, their wrists still bound. Olivia, pale and shaking, didn't resist as an officer pulled her to her feet. Lucas's smirk was long gone. "Jason, don't do this. We can work something out." Jason chuckled. "Like you worked things out with Olivia." "No thanks." One of the officers picked up the syringe from the coffee table. "Is this what they plan to use on you?" Jason nodded. "That, and a whole lot worse." The officer sighed. "You were lucky tonight." Jason's eyes darkened. "No, officer, I was prepared." As Lucas and his men were dragged out, Olivia looked back, her eyes filled with pleading and regret. "Jason, please, I never wanted this." Jason took a slow breath, staring at the woman he once loved. "And yet, you let it happen." She dropped her head in shame as the officer led her away. As the last police car pulled out, RK clapped Jason on the back. "It's over, brother." Jason exhaled deeply. "Yeah, it is." 6 months later. Jason sat at his desk, looking over financial reports. A knock at the door made him look up. His assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Carter, there's a Kristen Sterling here to see you." Jason's brow lifted. "Send her in." A tall, blonde woman walked in, her eyes filled with quiet intelligence. "So," she said with a smile, "you're the man who finally put my idiot cousin away." Jason smirked. "Guilty as charged." She extended her hand. "I'm Kristen. I wanted to meet you in person." Jason shook her hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. A spark of something new. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to start over.